I, Mehul Soni, on behalf of Extramural Lectures team of IIT Madras, welcome you all to today's lecture. We have with us today a well-known Indian physician turned leadership consultant, mythologist and author, Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik, who shall be speaking about mythology and reality. Devdutt Pattanaik is a renowned author, mythologist and leadership consultant whose work focuses on deriving management insights from mythology to reveal a very Indian approach to modern business. He has authored over 30 books, many of them bestsellers like Myth equals Mithya, Business Sutra, The Pregnant King, and Jaya, an illustrated retelling of the Mahabharata. Trained in medicine, he spent 15 years in the healthcare industry with companies such as Apollo Health Street and Sanofi Aventis before joining Ernst & Young as business advisor. His columns on management and culture appear regularly in the Economic Times, Midday, and Speaking Tree. He was also featured in a special series called Business Sutra on CNBC TV and CNBC Awaz. His TED Talk is one of the most viewed talks with over 1 million views. He was the Chief Belief Officer of Future Group and is now a sought-after public speaker and a culture consultant for corporations and business leaders. We now call upon Professor Preeti Agalyam to welcome the chief guest with a fruit basket. I now invite the speaker, Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik, to deliver his much-awaited talk on mythology and reality.
Hi, good afternoon. What I'll do is I'll speak for about 20-25 minutes and then we can have a question-answer session. Is that fine? Yeah? So I'll begin by telling a story. The story is from the famous betaal pachisi. Betaal pachisi is a set of 25 stories that are told by a betaal or a ghost to a king called Vikramaditya. And at the end of every story, there is a puzzle that has to be solved. So I will play the role of the betaal. I am the ghost. I am going to tell you the story, and you will be Vikramaditya, and you will solve the problem, right? So IIT Madras has to solve it, right? If you don't get it right, then nobody will get it right. Yeah. So once upon a time, there was this king, and he couldn't sleep at night. He just couldn't sleep at night. So he consulted the local doctors, and the doctor said, there's nothing physically wrong with you. So finally, he contacted a local oracle, and the oracle said, your ancestors are troubled. You have to feed your ancestors. So which means you have to conduct a ceremony which Hindus call Shraddh. So the king performed the ceremony on the river bank, and the part of the ceremony involves taking a ball of rice and putting it in the river where the ancestors will receive it. So he walked into the river with a ball of rice to give it to his ancestors, when suddenly 3 hands shot up from the waters. One hand had grass on it, and he realized this was a Brahmin's hand. Another had scars on it, and he realized that was a soldier's hand. And a third hand had jewelry on it, and he realized that it was a merchant's hand. So he didn't understand in which hand should he put the ball of rice for his ancestor, because there were 3 hands and he expected only one. So suddenly he realizes he doesn't understand. He goes back to the oracle and says, you said I have to feed it to my ancestor. I expected 1 hand to come up, but 3 hands have come. I don't understand this. He said, and the oracle said, you're right. You're supposed to give it to your deceased father. The ancestor is your deceased father, but clearly there's a confusion as to who your father is. He says, that is true because I don't understand this. And while he was discussing this with an oracle, an old woman appeared and said, I will explain what has happened. You have 3 fathers and you have to decide which amongst these 3 is your real father. So that's impossible. No man can have 3 fathers. He says, yes, but you do have 3 fathers, but you have to decide which man is the real father. So he says, please explain the story. He says, long time ago, there was this wicked king in a neighboring city, and he had a merchant who lived in the city, and the merchant died unexpectedly while on a sea voyage. And the king decided to take all his wealth and declare that the wealth now belonged to the state, to the king. And so the merchant's wife, the widow, became destitute. And the merchant and his daughter was an orphan and she had nothing. And so they were very angry with the king, but they could do nothing because all the property had been taken away by the king. They were destitute. So the widow and her daughter left the kingdom and walked into the forest. In the forest, they saw a man who had been impaled to a tree, and he was dying a slow death. And that man also looked like a merchant. And he said, why are you suffering so? What happened? Who did this to you? He said, that same evil king who took away your property has done this to me. I too am a merchant, and he has done this to take my property away. So we have a common enemy. The king who ruined your life has ruined my life too. Will you help me take revenge on this evil king? So the merchant's wife said, yes, but how can I do it? I'm a widow. I have this little child with me, this girl of marriageable age. Now I can't get married because I have no money. And you are dying. You are pinned to a tree. You're going to die any minute. So the man said, very simple, let me marry your daughter. Declare publicly that I am the husband of your daughter. And any child she bears then officially is my child. And that child is obliged to take revenge and kill this evil king. So the merchant's wife said, why should I do that? Why should I ruin my daughter's life by giving it in marriage to a man who's about to die? He says, don't worry, if you promise that, I will give you a pot of gold which I've hidden in the forest. And that forest, that will be a lot of money. So you can take care of your child for the rest of your life, but just officially declare that she is my wife. So the merchant's wife takes a decision and says, okay, I give you my daughter. Legally, she is your wife. As soon as she says this, the man who is impaled to the tree dies, leaving behind a small note which was clutched in his hand, which tells where the pot of gold is hidden. So the merchant's wife now has a pot of gold and a young daughter who is officially someone's wife and also a widow. Now she says, how do I fulfill my promise to the man? When the girl grows up, the mother encourages her to have an affair with a priest. The priest is invited to the house and given gold and said, be my daughter's husband for as long as you wish. As a result of that union, the girl gets pregnant. As soon as the child is born, the mother takes the child and leaves it at the doorstep of a king who has no children. So the child is raised as a warrior, and that's the king whose story I began with. So the 3 hands belong to one, the merchant, who is his legal father. Second hand belongs to the priest, who is his biological father. And the third hand belongs to the man who raised him, his foster father. Who is the real father? But he can give only the ball of rice only to one. It can't be divided. So merchant, that's legally right. Nobody cares for the biological father. And foster father. You can never solve this problem, no matter how much you try, because it all depends on definition of fatherhood. Because fatherhood is a social concept, as we know it today. In nature, this concept of who is your father in society is a very different from biological father. Because fatherhood is a legal concept. Because it is important, because depending on who your father is, you will inherit property. Whose property will you inherit? The merchant's property, the priest's property, or the king's property. So it is tied to the concept of property. And property is not a natural concept. It is an artificial, cultural, human concept. Animals have territories. They can't give it to their children. Humans have property that they can pass on to their children. Therefore, fatherhood as a concept in human society is very different from what happens in nature. So fatherhood, biologically, if you follow the biological rules, then the king's father is the priest. But if you follow legal, it's the merchant. If you follow emotional, then it is the king. All three things are true, depending on what definition you choose. So it is the definition which decides what reality is. And where do definitions come from? Definition is a concept. It comes from the human imagination. What you consider is correct. Others may disagree, but what do you? So in the Mahabharata, when people say Pandavas have a right to the land, they forget that Pandavas are not the children of Pandu. Pandu was married to a woman who was made pregnant by the gods, and they were raised by their granduncle Bhishma. So biologically, they have no bloodline of the Pandavas, of the Kuru kingdom. The blood belongs to someone else. Legally, they're Pandu's children, so they were right on his property and therefore the crown of the kingdom. But they are raised by a man who has renounced the kingdom. So you suddenly realize the great wars that happen around the world are based on definitions and property. Notions of property. So what we consider reality is a very complex idea. What is real for an animal is not real for a human being. So imagine there is a saint and a sinner walking in the forest, and a tiger confronts them. How will the tiger look at the saint and the sinner? Will it go and eat the sinner, or will it go and eat the saint? Because whose definition? Did anybody tell the definition to the tiger? Or let me give you a simpler example. A pigeon which wants to shit. Will it say, oh, that's a politician, I must go and do it there. That's a film star, I can't do it there. Oh, that's an elderly person, I must respect him, I should not do it there. Nature doesn't care. Definitions like saint and sinner, honest and corrupt are human definitions based on our assumptions, our definitions, our notions of what is right and wrong. Nature does not care for any of it. A bowl of rice will taste exactly the same to the saint and the sinner. A glass of water will taste exactly the same to the honest and to the dishonest man. So nature does not have these divisions in its head. So reality, when we use words like reality, what we're talking about is human reality. And human reality is born in the imagination. It doesn't exist in nature. So what is real is a very complex question. Property is not real. It's a human construction. Then it depends on what you define as real. That 10 people agree to, 100 people agree to, 1 billion people agree to. How do you decide what is real? Democratically? Through authority? Through a supernatural force that is accessible only to one human being? On what basis do you decide reality? And that is what people often mistake. So when you read the books which talk about reality, we must ask ourselves, whose reality are you talking about? So when you read the Vedic scriptures, they're obsessed with this idea, and they'll say what is experienced by a jiva, that which is not alive, and a sajiva, that which is alive. What is the difference between the two? And so the living things experience hunger. They want to eat. They want to eat because they want to stay alive. They have the concept of life with them. A non-living thing does not have the concept of life, so it doesn't seek food. So for example, fire. Fire burns as long as there is fuel. When the fuel gets over, it doesn't go in search of more fuel. It stops burning. But when a living creature is hungry, it will go in search of food. And therefore the plant is alive. Because why does it grow? Because it is seeking food. It needs sunlight, it needs water, so it is seeking food. Which means if it doesn't get food, it will die, which creates anxiety, which creates fear. It wants to be alive. So gardeners will tell you, if you deny water, a flowering plant water for some time, it will burst into flowers. Because its desire to stay alive is so high that the flowers are produced so that pollination can happen. So even if it dies, somewhere a part of it will stay alive. So suddenly you realize the plants experience fear, but they can't run from animals that eat it. Animals, so the word uses chara-chara. Achara is that which cannot move, that means plants. And chara is that which can move. And that which can move, moves towards pasture, moves towards prey, it moves towards food. So all animals are moving, they migrate for food. They're continuously moving, or you migrate away from a threat. So you move towards opportunity and you move away from threat. Particular movements. And suddenly you realize their reality is different, because their reality is about, let me find food, let me be away from a predator. And that's how animals, they form herds because of that, they form packs because of that, they form hives because of that, they mate because of that. So their reality is very different from the plant's reality. The plant's reality is very different from a rock's reality. And then humans come along. Humans, like plants, are hungry for food. Humans, like animals, are afraid of predators. But humans have something which no other creature has. Humans have imagination at a scale that is phenomenal. There is some imagination in a crow, in a chimpanzee, because they can problem solve. They can solve small, minor problems. But nothing on the human scales, because I can imagine. So a deer will get afraid when it can see a tiger, smell a tiger, or hear a tiger. Humans can imagine a tiger all the time. And so we are always frightened. We are more frightened than any animal in the world. And that is what our motivation is in life. We want more money. Why? Because I want money, I want food, not just for now. And give an animal food, it is happy, it stops. We want today's food, tomorrow's food, day after tomorrow's food, food 10 years later, food 100 years later, food for ourselves, for our family, for our children, for our extended family, for 7 generations. Money is never enough. You'll never see that. Animals hoard, but only for the season, instinctively for what they need to survive. We don't save money because we want to survive. We just want more money and money and money and money. It's coming from imagination, imagined fears. And imagination then tells us, an animal knows whether, when an animal looks at another animal, it asks 4 questions. And you can talk to any neuroscientist about this. This is commonly 4 questions they will ask. Is that a predator? Will it eat me? Is that a prey? Can I eat it? Is that a mate? Can we produce babies? Is that a rival? Will it steal my food? If these 4 questions are in the negative, the animal doesn't care. But when humans look at another animal, what do they think? They can imagine anything. Because imagination changes the rules of the game. You are not just looking at your sensory data. Everything is shifted in your database. Because your denominator has changed, your multiplier has changed, everything has changed. It's all in calculus. So you can be threatened by anything or anyone. You can be insecure all the time, and humans are so insecure. You can meet the richest man in the world, the most powerful man in the world, the most beautiful man in the world, and he'll still be insecure. You can have the best PhDs in the world, the best jobs in the world, they can still be insecure. You're terrified. You look into the mirror and you ask, who am I? Because an animal knows precisely where it is located in the food chain and the pecking order. Am I alpha or omega? It wants to know, otherwise it will not survive, it will die. Its survival depends on knowledge, whether I am food. A deer won't go look at a tiger and say, maybe. There is no doubt. But humans are always thinking, maybe. So I look into the mirror and I think I am diamond. And I go and meet my boss at work. And my boss says, you are not diamond, you're plastic. So I get very depressed. I get so depressed that I go home and I meet my wife and I say, what do you think, diamond or plastic? And my wife looks at me and says, is that a trick question? And then I sort of say that, well, diamond. So she finally says, okay, you're not diamond, you're not plastic also. You are cheap plastic. Now, what is real? Can an IIT Madras engineer tell me what is real? Am I diamond, plastic, or cheap plastic? Because all 3 are imaginations. My imagination, my boss's imagination, my wife's imagination. What is real? Is there an app that can tell me what is true? And then you realize how fragile our lives are. You really don't know what's real. And that's the world I live in. That's the world of mythology. Because fantasy is nobody's truth. Fact is everybody's truth. Between these 2 extremes, fantasy and fact, there is a whole range of ideas which is called somebody's truth. Somebody believes you are cheap plastic, but somebody believes you are plastic. And somebody genuinely believes you are diamond. Who do you want to prove right and wrong? how will you mathematically disprove one thesis? Because I believe it. I experience it. And if you don't matter to me, your opinions don't matter to me, your theorems don't matter to me, how does your opinion affect my reality? That's the world, that my personal subjective truth, my experiences is the world of myth. Mythology is subjective truth of a people that is expressed through stories, symbols, and rituals. So stories, symbols, and rituals of a people reveal their truth. We are living in a world where everybody is obsessed with objectivity. But objectivity is like a jealous God which does not like anybody else but that one God. But the moment you say, no, subjectivity is also important. My truth is important, your truth is important, there are 200 people in this room, there are 200 different truths in this room. Then the conversation quality changes because you don't argue anymore. You don't say my truth is the truth and your truth is false. You say my truth is true, your truth is true, let's have a conversation so that we can expand each other's truth and move towards an infinite truth. So you move from the world of vivad. Vivad is where I'm trying to prove I am right and you are wrong. Samvad is where I'm listening to you and saying you are also right and I am also right. Let's figure out common grounds, figure out why we differentiate. We don't have to agree on everything. It's okay. But it's very difficult. I always ask people, we have heard of right-wing historians and left-wing historians, right-wing philosophers and left-wing philosophers. Have you heard of a right-wing chemist and a left-wing chemist? Have you heard of a right-wing physicist and a left-wing physicist? No. Because when you're dealing with physics, chemistry, and biology, you're not dealing with human beings. Therefore, you can have a periodic table of elements. You cannot have a periodic table of human emotions. Doctors have been trying for a long time. There's something called DSM, which is the American Psychiatrist Association is trying to classify all mental ailments into a periodic table. It's not working. Because humans cannot be put in a box. Things can be put in a box. Matter can be put in a box. Plants can be put in a box. Animals also to some extent can be through taxonomy, you can classify them and lock them in a box. But the moment human beings come into the picture, imagination comes into the picture. The moment imagination comes into the picture, everything changes. Because what is the definition of rich? Is it how much money you have in the bank? Or how do you feel when you're walking out with no money in your wallet? And I have met a lot of people who are technically very rich, but are terrified because they feel they are very poor. What is reality? Their bank balance or their emotion? Who are you talking to? Their bank balance or to their emotion? Who decides what is real? You or me? So next time you fall in love and take your spouse to your parents, remember in their reality you are an idiot. In your current reality, maybe you are the smartest guy on earth. 10 years later, you may change your mind. With that, so that's my little take on myth and reality. If you have any questions, we have half an hour. Thank you. How do we take the questions? Does someone want to moderate it? Yeah. The third row over here, just third row.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Aniket. There are, it's a long question, but I'll try to cut it short. But still, because I've read few books and I've been reading your articles also. So apart from this, and I'm a student of sociology. Mm-hmm. So, and that too, that brings me to an interest where I have an interest in religion and all sorts of caste and mythology also. So when religion actually started with a progression through after Totemism, naturalism, and then religion comes, and then then we divide objects, divide things in sacred and profane. And most of the mythologies, whatever we have come across, are mythologies which are related to the sacred elements, not to the profane. And this sacred element brings in the idea of a propaganda of spreading something which is not real. Maybe a reality which is real for someone who is trying to expand this propaganda, but a reality which might not be real for people who do not believe in that reality.
Yeah. So question?
So the question here is how do we understand that where this propaganda and what this propaganda, how it deals with mythology?
See, I've used many words. Where do you locate justice? Is justice mythology or real?
It's subjective.
So it's mythology, right?
No, mythology is something which I would say, and even if I guess you'll also agree, mythology is something which is documented, which is not documented, and also in many ways, not in just literal sense, documented in verbal sense and many forms. And they try to derive an authority.
That's your definition, right? I just defined it over here. I said subjective truth expressed through stories, symbols, and rituals. Justice is...
So my question is, okay, I'm asking you, how do you understand mythology and propaganda together?
Well, propaganda is just communication that you don't like.
And mythology?
Mythology is subjective truth expressed through stories, symbols, and rituals.
Thank you.
Yes.
You have just put a point from your Mahabharata lessons.
Yes.
So just I want to add one thing, that their fathers also, they are also not the blood of Kurus, as
Yeah, it depends on how much you value bloodline, no?
that is the thing. So total thing you are telling that Pandavas has not the opportunity, and they should not fight against that one, as we take care of that lines.
No, you're extrapolating the fact. I didn't say that. I just said what whom we consider Pandavas as the sons of Pandu are the legal sons. That's all I'm saying. I'm not arguing the war. For that you have to read my book. Yeah. You see, we often look at things from a lawyer's. You're wearing a lawyer's hat or a judge's hat. If you wear a lawyer's hat or a judge's hat, you'll never look at things scientifically. So be careful of a judge's hat or a lawyer's hat, because they need to decide right and wrong, good and bad. You don't look at data then.
And one more thing, that do you believe that Mahabharata is a true story or something? Because
it's my truth, maybe it's not your truth.
no, I also believe. Then one more thing, that do you think that the story line could be means it was extended in that line that Vishnu didn't get married. If he got married, then the whole problem was solved, I think. So
What problem?
whole problem is that all this young and all this all sorts of problems will happen. If he got married, his son will be the king, and the total problem has been solved.
Good. Yes, please. Can we ask the lady? See, why the mic's only going to the men?
So, according to you, sir, what should be one's relation with one's food?
It's one's food.
Food, yeah, the one which he intakes. So, what should be one's relation with one's food, so that there is harmony in nature?
There's never harmony in nature when you're eating. You're always killing someone. There is no way that you can eat. The act of eating is violence. The simple act of eating.
But sir, that can be minimized.
That depends on your definition and your quantification of what is minimum. It's your definition of what is minimum. And that will always create conflict. Because, do you think animals should be castrated? You know what's castration? Yeah. So India's bullock cart economy is based on bulls being castrated. Is that cruelty or kindness?
It's cruelty.
So that cruelty has ensured you have food on the table. So basically the balls of those animals have been cut so that their hormones are reduced, so that human beings can control them, use them for bullock carts and use them for plowing the field on which vegetables are grown. Ask the bull, how it felt. Why it feels nothing when a cow comes. It feels nothing. It's basically a eunuch. All this bullock cart economy for thousands of years, India has run on bullock carts. It's because we have chopped off a little baby bull's testicles. Is it cruelty or kindness? From that cruelty is born all of human civilization. So the assumption that human civilization is born out of kindness is wrong. So we don't realize, what do we define as appropriate cruelty? That is okay. This is not okay. So when people don't understand, how do you quantify appropriateness of cruelty? Who decides? Who is this judge who will decide कि ये cruelty ठीक है? And that's what you have to ask. So I understand the repercussions of your question.
Hello, sir. It's in our philosophy or mythology, it's always said that the world you see around you is a Maya. So because we say that, as you said and we said, that it's just born out of an imagination. But in a second sense, it is also said that Maya is a goddess. So we are giving it a status of goddess. So why this contrast is existing?
See, Maya word is in Sanskrit, and the problem is we translate it in English, and there's always a problem. If you go to the root of the word Maya, Ma comes from the word measurement. So Mapdand comes from the same. Ma means to measure. So Maya is measured reality. What you measure, so when you say this is tall and that is short, so you have done measurement, you have a denominator, right? That is considered Maya. Is it real? No, it's a human construction. So science is based on measurement, right? So all science is Maya. What it means, what does it mean philosophically? It means that no matter how hard you try, you will always be restricted by measurement. So but without measurement you can't live. If you don't measure, how do you know how much to give, how to divide food? So without measurement, human society cannot live. Therefore, she's a goddess. Maya is called a delusory goddess. वो छल कपट करती है. She cheats you, she tricks you. Because measurement gives you a notion which is not really true. So I have more money than you, therefore I am richer than you. These are all delusions. I have done more good deeds than you, so I am the saint, you are the sinner. But the tiger doesn't recognize it because animals don't measure. They don't compare. They will fight and figure out who is stronger, who is weaker. They'll see the person and that's all they care about, their survival. They won't have a measurement based on how much wealth who has. That measurement and the ability to compare is a very peculiarly human trait, which we have taken it to another level. So that is what they mean when they say Maya. It doesn't mean illusion. That's a translation which is based on a 19th century understanding of India. Because remember, the Europeans thought that Indians were mystical creatures. Even now they think we're mystical. Yeah. So that was a definition which is outgrown, and people have outgrown those definitions. So Maya basically means that which is measured. Mithya means an incomplete truth. And Satya means a complete truth. And because completeness is infinite, you can never measure it. Therefore, the gods' names will be Ananta Vasudeva. Ananta means infinity. So infinity is embedded in the name of God. To say that you will never know it, you can't know it. No matter how much you try. Infinity, how many people can measure infinity? So you'll always be in Maya. So Ananta is always outside, so don't act smart. So the Vamana Avatar story, when he says 3 steps, who decides what is 3 steps? The dwarf, the giant? What is 3 steps for you may be only so much. But for someone else, it is the universe. So they're talking about proportions. Or when Narasimha's story, when he says, not an animal, not a human, not day nor night, it is saying, how do you know where the boundaries are? What are the divisions? When do you say this stops and this begins? When do you say this ends? Because someone can see between the ends, they can create a space. So this notion of Maya is this obsession with boundaries, measurement, control. And therefore they're saying, ye sab Maya hai. This is all measured reality. Your assumptions about life are based on measurement. Be careful. So the sages of India would say it's good because without which, as I said, you can't live. Society cannot function without measurement. So it is vyavaharik. It is not paramatmik. When you put the denominator of infinity, all measurement becomes useless, of meaningless. That's what they're trying to explain. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, correct me on this. The person who talked about Bhishma, see, Bhishma was living out a curse that he had committed in his earlier life. That's why he was living for a long life. If you
Chodo na, it's see the power of mythology. Allow people to have other truths. Yes, the ladies over there. Now all the guys are getting, we don't want to take this. But I've noticed this in many, somehow the mics only go to the guys. It's not right. Yeah.
What according to you is Sita's role in the Ramayana? Is she a heroine? Is she a goddess? Is she a victim? Or is she today's empowered woman trying to change the social norms? What according to you is
Well, according to me, she is a person. So I don't want to gender her because that is itself bias. She's a person who is treated badly for no fault of hers.
I'm not talking with a gender specific thing, but I'm talking about the role.
Well, role is whatever you want to attribute it. So you can write
What
it.
do you attribute?
I'm telling you as a person. I have no other opinions. She's a person who is facing life.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? Am I allowed to have that opinion?
Is that the gender specific opinion?
No. I think every human being faces similar problems as Sita.
Okay, because
You think you're the most brilliant guy on earth, but IIT will not give you admission.
okay, are you trying to be safe, or do you do not want to share your opinion?
Do you want to judge me? Clearly you're getting great fun. You want to corner me.
No,
So
because
there's a power game going on right now.
because we did hear about different versions of Ramayana, so many interpretations of Ramayana. Just want to hear your
Each
version
one is
of.
valid. Each one is valid to the author.
No, I'm not evaluating that. I want to know
You're
your
evaluating me.
your interpretation of Sita's role in Ramayana.
There's a book called Sita, an illustrated retelling of its cost, I think 499 rupees.
Okay. My question is this, the first story that you said. So who got the rice in the end, according to the story?
You are Vikramaditya. You have to decide. You see, that's the whole thing. Different versions will give different answers, depending on social constructs. Today's society will say that why should a man be the forefather?
Not the mother.
So the stories will change, right? Therefore, who's Krishna's mother? Devaki or Yashoda? Blood mother or milk mother? You'll never be able to answer the question unless you say my heart is big enough to accommodate both, which is very difficult for most people. Because we believe only one truth exists, and therefore two cannot be accommodated, and therefore diversity will always be a problem. You see, I always tell people, when you say polytheism, mythology is typically used with polytheism, religion is used with monotheism, and rationality is associated with atheism. Replace the word theism with philosophy. The atheism becomes nihilism. I don't believe in anything. Monotheism becomes fascism. And polytheism becomes liberalism. So now decide where you want to go.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Sir, here.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've read your Sita and Jaya books, and I really like how you take an anecdote and you try to interpret it philosophically, politically, and in societal terms. So what's your thought process like? How do you draw on the existing literature, and how do you contribute?
Okay. See, the thing is, what I do is I always try to figure out, as far as it's very difficult in Indian literature, is to figure out the historical period in which it was written. It's very important to figure out the historical period in which these things were written, because that reveals a lot. For example, Valmiki Ramayana has no reference to Lakshman Rekha. So it's written in Sanskrit, but there's no reference to the concept of Lakshman Rekha. So when people say original Ramayana, what they don't realize is there is no one Valmiki Ramayana. There are 4 editions. There's a Bombay edition, Delhi edition, Calcutta edition, and Chennai edition. And when you compare the 4 texts, only 30% is common amongst them. So even the scholars aren't sure what is original Valmiki Ramayana. We don't know, because there are 4 versions of it written in 4 different parts. At least they have been found till now. Maybe somebody will figure out another text a couple of years later. When you people say, I was in Gujarat recently, and they said, I said, which is the original Ramayana? They said Tulsi Ramayana. And I said, that's 400 years old, written in Awadhi. And I asked them, do you know Girdhar Ramayana, which is a Gujarati Ramayana? They had no clue. And I said, do you know Dandi Ramayana, which is written in, Dandi Ramayana is in Odisha. It's also called Jagmohan Ramayana. They didn't know that. They had heard of Kamba Ramayana, but they had not heard of Ranganath Ramayana, or Bhavarth Ramayana, or Krittibasa Ramayana. So there are so many Ramayans, which each of them talk of regional issues. So you see a shift in quality of conversations. You see shifts happening. You have Adbhuta Ramayana, you have Adhyatma Ramayana in Sanskrit. There's Bhavbhuti's Ramayana, which is written as a Sanskrit play where Ram is just a prince, a noble prince. There is no concept of divinity associated with him. Bhasha Ramayana, which is full of, it's a play where there is no divinity associated with him. He is not, because that is written in a particular period where Vaishnavism is just rising as a concept. But by the time you come to Kamba Ramayana, divinity is being attributed to him. By the time you come to the later Ramayana, by the time of Tulsi Ramayana, he is God, so you're seeing a historical process manifesting in stories. So history will shape your subjectivity, and therefore it will shape the way you tell the story. So for me, that journey is very exciting. How does it shift? How does it change? What words appear when? Why do they? For example, Mahabharata has no reference to Krishna's cowherd days. In the Bhagavad Gita, the word for cowherd is used only, he's called 40 names, but only one of them is Govinda, the cowherd. Why is that? Isn't he a famous known Gopala, Govinda? But then you realize the first time this is referred to very explicitly is 400 years after the Mahabharata was written. So historical is interesting, but as I said, it's a very blurred thing, but you can broadly get trends. When did this become important? When does that become important? How did the story shift and change? What happened in the 14th century? Why this dramatic explosion of regional Ramayans from the 10th century onwards? So you are excited by that. Then you see poetry, the wall carvings. How do they form? What are the imageries that are formed? All that is informing storytelling. So the understanding of a story has to be seen in context. So many a time when people just usually use words like Ram, Sita, they have no understanding that you're talking about 2000 years of history. You're talking of literature, 400, 500 pieces of literature at the very least. Temples, each temple having different forms, festivals. Do you know there's something called a Wayanad Ramayana? In Wayanad, there is a Ramayana which is located in the city of Wayanad. The same thing is practiced in northern. There are 3 or 4 cities in North India where they will, like in Banaras, they will say Lanka is on the other side and Ayodhya is on this side. They enact it. There are houses where they'll say Kaushalya ka ghar hai. So it is a living tradition. Is that also Ramayana? So you suddenly realize when you use a simple word like Ram, there are many, many, many ideas embedded in it. So I like to explore that. So there's no such thing as one idea. The moment you do, then you're going to the realm of fascism. One idea, one idea. There's no one idea. There are many ideas. Can you accommodate many ideas? That requires a lot of scholarship. You have to work really hard because you suddenly see the language shifts. You're talking about, then you realize philosophically, they're talking about very complex sexual relationships. You know, what is appropriate for Ram? What is not appropriate for Ram? Why does Ram's story talk about monogamy, but Krishna's story talks of polygamy, which is appropriate social conduct? What is okay? What is not okay? Why? Then you suddenly realize that, oh, the stories are deeper. They're trying to tell you who defines what is fidelity. That is the whole story in Ramayana, the idea of fidelity. Why does the man who is comfortable with Ahalya not comfortable when people gossip about? What is gossip? Why does the Dhobi story appear only in the 14th century? It didn't exist before that. All the gossip exists in the Valmiki Ramayana. Dhobi doesn't exist. The Dhobi, now why Dhobi? Dhobi is about cleanliness, washing, pollution, touchability and untouchability. So concepts have changed. So ideas have changed. You'll see many stories in which Sita is accused not by the men but by the women. Where the women have a problem with her because they feel Ram loves her too much. Because he says, Ekam Patni Vrata, Ekam Patni Vrata. So the women get jealous. And they say, we must ruin this marriage by putting doubt. But have you heard of those stories? Yeah. Because it depends on the storyteller. What politics does the storyteller want to project? And therefore you pick stories. Yeah?
Sir, I have 3 quick questions on your far left here.
Yeah, but I'll allow you only one. So
on your far left.
Yeah, because that will be the last.
On your far left here. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. One question.
The first story you had, I have a factual question on that because I've gone through the Garuda Puranam which talks about the Sapinda Karana, where you actually take the rice and divide it between your ancestors. So what is the dilemma there in that story? I don't understand. Because
each is for a generation.
Yeah, so but you can still take it and divide it, which is according to the Garuda Puranam. Okay, just check on that.
I'll check that.
So the actual question,
I'll check with the ancestors.
Yeah, the actual question I have is it also true to say that nature simply does not care about myth or reality either?
I don't know. I have not talked to nature as yet.
It doesn't see the holy cow because it still makes bullshit.
See, we don't know what nature thinks. We are attributing thought to nature because
but you said nature does not care.
Okay. That I stand
all
corrected.
Those constructs.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Okay. And the last one is about the Kuru dynasty. Pandu and Dhritarashtra themselves were not of the Kuru dynasty because of the Amba Ambalika.
Okay. You decide who should get the land.
Yeah, so thanks.
So when you said that mythology is stories, symbols, rituals, my thinking is that our generation is not so much attuned to that as is to say interpretations. Which do you think has larger, how can we learn better from this if there is something to learn? Is it through interpretations or is it through immersing in stories, rituals?
You see, there's no choice but to interpret. Humans will always interpret. If somebody says he's not interpreting, you have just met a liar. Yeah, you can't but interpret. Your mind will interpret whether you like it or not. There's no such thing. Everything is an interpretation. It's how you see the world. It's your perception going through series of frameworks which constructs your reality. Right? So your experiences shape it, your knowledge shapes it, your politics shapes it, your personality shapes it. So the story itself is someone's version of reality. The symbol is someone's. See, there's a difference between what is called an experience and an expression. I experience something and I express it through language. Now, the language that I speak and the language that you hear are very different. Right? I'll conclude, in fact, with this. You see, we always forget, I've just written the Gita book, and I always tell people that Krishna is not telling you the Gita. He's telling Arjun the Gita. And the person who's overhearing it is a servant with telepathic powers called Sanjaya. And Sanjaya is transmitting it to a blind king called Dhritarashtra. Now, Krishna and Sanjaya are saying the same words. But one understands the Gita, the other is only parroting it. How do you know the difference? So what is given is called Gyan, and what is received is called Vigyan. So there's a huge gap between what is given and what is received. What Krishna is saying is received very differently by Arjun and is received very differently by Dhritarashtra. Because Arjun is seeking a solution to a problem, while Dhritarashtra is judging Krishna, who is fighting for the other side. So the judge and the seeker will see very different things, the same data point. If you understand this, you'll realize that everything ultimately is an interpretation. Interpretation is Vigyan. So, वैज्ञानिक बनना है तो interpret करना है. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now call upon Professor L.S. Ganesh to felicitate the speaker with a memento. I also request Mr. Pattnaik to sign the mugs and write something about EML on the yearbook. Yeah, we also have a sale of Mr. Pattnaik's books outside at discounted prices. I thank you all for your overwhelming support. We have more EMLs coming up, so we request you to keep updated.